We finalized the closures by the next day. Staff were paid early with bonuses. Contractors were informed. Lights were dimmed. And by Sunday night, Harcourt Retreat, the new name scrawled across every permit, ceased to be a public enterprise. It became mine, my sanctuary, and my move. Word reached Felicity quickly. I expected a phone call. What I got was a summons. Daniel met me at the cafe near Piccadilly. He looked tired, hair mussed like he'd been dragging his fingers through it since sunrise. He pushed the espresso toward me before sitting. "She wants to see you." "I'm not interested." "She's gathering the family?" "Then let her." He exhaled slowly, voice tight. "She thinks you've embarrassed us." I sipped the espresso. She embarrassed herself. "She won't take this lying down." "Then maybe she'll finally stand for something." He blinked. "Daniel," I said, lowering my voice, "I'm not your family's charity project. I'm not here to be tolerated like a seasonal centerpiece. And if they think they can erase me by shaming me, they've misunderstood who I am." His silence was heavy. Then he nodded. "You're right." It took 3 days before the invitation came. White cardstock, gold embossing, a family council, hosted at the estate. "You're just a guest," the message read, like a sneer printed in calligraphy. I RSVP'd with 2 words. "See you." The day arrived shrouded in gray fog, the kind that made the hedgerows look like mourning veils. I pulled up in the same car they once scoffed at, only now it gleamed with new paint, fresh plates, and the subtle insignia of my holding company etched into the glass. A butler opened the door. "Lady Harcourt," he said. I smiled. "That's new." Inside, the family was already gathered. 15 of them, spread like a jury across velvet armchairs and antique ottomans. Felicity at the center, her posture dagger straight. "You've caused quite a stir," she began. I said nothing. "We understand you purchased Lakeshore Retreat. Harcourt Retreat, actually. You've closed it for the season." "I have." "And canceled Christmas. For those who never invited me to theirs." The air chilled. She narrowed her eyes. "This is petty, vengeful. This is mine." A murmur rippled through the room. Cousins whispered. Uncle Graham shifted. Only Daniel met my gaze without flinching. "You were welcomed into this family," she started. "As a guest," I interrupted. "That's what you told me. And I behaved like one. I respected your rules, your traditions, your snubs." I stepped closer. "But you forgot something. Guests can leave." And I did. And then I returned, not to ask, not to plead, but to take back the dignity you thought I wouldn't notice you'd stolen. Her mouth thinned. "And now?" "Now I rebuild. Not just that resort, but a name." She stared at me for a long time, and for the first time in 5 years, she did not look down at me. She looked fart, moment. When I left the room, the silence was louder than applause. Back at the lake, I stood at the edge of the dock as frost dusted the boards. A voice behind me, "Daniel." "You're not the same woman I married," he said. "I know. I think I like her more." And he stepped beside me. But just as I reached for his hand, the phone rang. It was Dominic. "Victoria," he said breathlessly, "you need to come in. Now." Someone tried to access the server. Financial files, security logs, internal communication. I went still. My heart, however, surged into my throat. "Who?" "We don't know yet. But they tried hard, and they got in." And just like that, the war one thought I'd already won had only just begun. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The ride back to the resort was silent, save for the hum of tires eating up the frost-laced road. My fingers tapped out a frantic rhythm on the steering wheel while my mind tore through possibilities. Breach. Internal access. My security protocols had been state-of-the-art. Firewalls wrapped around encryption, audit logs monitored hourly. Whoever had cracked them either knew the architecture intimately or had help. And help could only come from the inside. I parked just outside the main lodge, heart thrumming, the chill cutting through my coat as I stepped into the brisk air. Dominic met me at the door. his face paler than I'd ever seen it, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other. They hit the server between 2:14 and 2:21 a.m., he said. Tunneled in through the maintenance login, escalated privileges, ran a port sweep. They weren't just looking for data, they were tracing control points. I swallowed. Meaning? Ownership directives, system overrides, authorization codes. They were trying to access anything that could roll back the purchase. The implications landed like stone in my stomach. Someone was trying to undo me, not with lawsuits or gossip, but with digital warfare. I want a list, I said. Every IP, every login, every person who's touched that server in the last 30 days. He nodded. We descended into the sub-level IT room, a fortress of steel racks, humming servers, and red blinking diagnostics. Screens glowed with packet traces and access logs. My name glared from the top of every authorization line. This wasn't amateur, Dominic muttered. They were after your authority stack. I figured as much. A technician looked up from her monitor. Ms. Harcourt, we found something. She pointed at a string of code. A signature. GreenLion_66. It hit me like a punch. I knew that name. It was an old handle used by Daniel's cousin Andrew when he freelanced in cybersecurity during university. Back before the family decided his tattoos made him unfit to inherit anything but a trust fund. He had skill. And motive. And more importantly, he had l'access. Keep digging, I ordered. Log everything, and shut down any remote tunnels. I want this place locked up tighter than a crown vault. Dominic hesitated. What will you do? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure if what I was planning next counted as damage control or retaliation. 2 hours later, I stood outside a sleek glass building nestled in central London, Martin & Bell, the family firm, where Andrew consulted in exchange for a fat title and zero oversight. The receptionist raised a brow as I entered. Victoria Harcourt, here to see Andrew Bell. She hesitated. Is he expecting you? No. Her mouth opened, then closed as I stepped past her and hit the elevator. The doors slid open on the 6th floor. Open-plan desks, overpriced chairs, and screens filled with lines of half-meaningless code. A few people glanced up. I ignored them. Andrew's office was at the end. Glass, of course, with a view that screamed inherited privilege. He was leaned back, feet on the desk, tie loose, sipping something from a bone-white espresso cup. Victoria, he said, smile slow and smug, was wondering when you'd come. You breached my servers. He lifted a brow. Allegedly. I stepped in and shut the door. You used your maintenance access. You ran my files. You dug through legal bindings you had no right to even see, asterisk. He leaned forward, tone sharpening. Felicity asked me to do a security audit. Said you'd left the resort vulnerable after your acquisition. I was protecting the family's interests. The family has no interests in Harcourt Retreat. Oh, but you're wrong. He turned his screen. A document appeared, dated 4 years ago, before Daniel and I had even married. Joint venture clause, Andrew said. Your husband's stake in the original property purchase was never nullified. The land was once held by the Bell Family Trust. You bought it through a shell company, but technically... His grin widened. You stole it. I blinked. That's not possible. I had legal clearance. Chain of custody was clean. Except it wasn't. Not entirely. My stomach twisted. Had I missed something? In my rush to reclaim, had I overlooked a buried clause? No court would. You think this is going to court? He cut in. Victoria, the war isn't legal. It's reputational. Your name's already in a few inboxes. Acquisition fraud. Data manipulation. Conflict of interest. You'll be buried in whispers before you can even file an injunction. I stared at him. Then I smiled. You're underestimating me, Andrew. Oh? You think I didn't plan for this? I reached into my purse and slid a flash drive across his desk. Here, all your access logs, every keystroke, every packet you routed through your firm's VPN. He paled. You didn't cover your tracks, I said softly. You thought this was chess, but I play something else. He stared. What do you want? For starters, stay out of my systems. Then, resign from Martin and Bell within the week, quietly. No lawsuits, no counterspin. And if I don't? I turn to leave. If you don't, you'll be the first Bell whose reputation drowns before the inheritance does. The door clicked, shut behind me. Back at the resort, Dominic met me with a cautious nod. We've patched the breach, replaced the server core, scrubbed the firmware. We're ghosted now. Good. I climbed the stairs to the master suite, my room now, the one that had once been reserved only for aristocrats and celebrities. I stood at the window, watched frost turn the lake to glass. The world looked still, but I knew the silence was an illusion. The next morning brought a letter. A legal notice. Felicity's signature at the bottom, claiming adverse possession, demanding the transfer of ownership due to familial misrepresentation. The gloves were off, but so were mine. I called my attorney, prepare the injunction, and initiate the countersuit, and pull everything we have on the Bell Trust. I want every offshore holding and tax discrepancy charted by week's end. She paused. All of it? All of it. Because this wasn't just a battle anymore. It was war. And I was done playing nice. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The fog hadn't lifted from the lake when the first media request landed in my inbox. Subject line: Victoria Harcourt, resort heiress or corporate usurper. It came from a lifestyle journalist who usually peddled in designer handbags and celebrity divorces, but the phrasing told me all I needed to know. The family had moved into phase 2 of their assault: narrative control. If they couldn't unseat me through technicalities or legal threats, they'd come for my public image instead. I closed the laptop, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, the frost clung to pine needles like silver veins. The resort's groundskeepers were already raking the gravel path, unaware that a tabloid war had begun above their heads. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee with shaking hands. Not fear, not anymore, just adrenaline, determination, wariness. The kind of tremble you get before stepping into a courtroom or a boxing ring. Daniel was still asleep in the master suite, unaware of the overnight media flurry. He'd chosen to stay at the resort the past 2 nights. A quiet gesture, a man slowly choosing sides. I appreciated it, but I didn't need a knight. I needed clean lines, sharp boundaries, and a mind ready to counter every move. My phone buzzed. From Claire, my PR manager. They're setting the story. You have 48 hours before it hits mainstream. Suggest we beat them to it. I typed back. Draft a statement. Sharp, personal, no apologies. Another ping. Claire, on it. But you need to be seen. Interview? Podcast? I stared at the screen. Visibility meant vulnerability, but it also meant power. I made my choice. Book the Harper Reed Hour, live. The Harper Reed podcast wasn't just popular, it was gospel for women in business and leadership. The host, Naomi Harper, had a reputation for pressing just hard enough to make guests uncomfortable, then pulling them back into empowerment. She called me the night before the broadcast. Victoria, Naomi said, her voice low and full of gravity, I don't take corporate drama lightly. If I do this, it's because your story means something. You're not here to clear your name, you're here to reclaim it. Right? Right. Then bring the fire. The day of the podcast, I wore a black silk blouse, no jewelry, and a single barrette pinning back my curls. On screen, my backdrop was the frosted lake and the resort's sprawling deck, empty now, but regal in its silence. Naomi's first question was soft. Who is Victoria Harcourt? And I answered. A woman who was told repeatedly that she didn't belong, in rooms, in families, at tables where her own worth was debated like it was a dish to be tasted and sent back. She nodded slowly. And now? Now I own the table. From there, we danced the tightrope. Family legacy, gender politics, class warfare disguised as hospitality, the ethics of ownership. I spoke calmly, no venom. Just truth. I told the world about the Thanksgiving dinner, where I was told I was just a guest, and how I bought the house they all used to call a legacy. By the time the interview ended, my inbox had imploded. Claire, trending. You're #2 in UK Twitter. Top quotes are going viral. Dominic, we have a problem. I froze. What now? He called. One of the cousins, Elspeth, filed a claim. She says the original land title was signed under duress. Her name's on a witness affidavit. Is it real? Hard to say. The paperwork is dated correctly, but the signature looks off. Forgery. Now, it wasn't just a battle of reputation or legality. It was a surgical strike on the foundations of the deal itself. We need a forensic handwriting analyst, I said, now. I already called one. They'll be here in 2 days. Good. And Victoria? Yes. Elspeth's lawyer is Melinda Grant. I closed my eyes. Melinda wasn't just a lawyer. She was a scalpel. Famous for bringing down 2 major family offices in Geneva and destroying a startup CEO in under a week by leaking a cache of personal emails. They weren't sending cousins anymore, they were sending warheads. 2 days passed like molasses over a fire, thick, slow, tense. In the meantime, Daniel's posture grew stiffer. His phone buzzed more often. His answers became more clipped. Is she contacting you? I asked. She's my mother. That doesn't answer the question. He looked up from his coffee, eyes bloodshot. Yes, she wants to meet, alone. Will you go? He hesitated. I think I have to. I nodded. You can't control me like you control this resort, he added. I'm not trying to control you, Daniel. I'm trying to survive. When the analyst arrived, I met her in the boardroom with Dominic and Claire. Her name was June, mid-50s, ex-Scotland Yard, and sharp as a blade. She scanned the signature on Elspeth's affidavit and then compared it to older documents. No way this was signed by the same hand, she said flatly. I exhaled. Relief, for once, wasn't sweet. It was bitter, because I knew this meant escalation. Can we prove it? I asked. Absolutely, but that won't stop them from planting another. She was right. This was whack-a-mole, and they had unlimited mallets. Claire leaned forward. What if we stop playing defense? What do you have in mind? We expose the trust itself. You mean Felicity's holdings? Yes, offshore accounts, shell companies, tax gaps. If we tie their assault to their own hypocrisies, they lose the narrative. Dominic raised an eyebrow. That's nuclear. I nodded. Then let's build the bomb. We divided tasks. Claire contacted a financial leak consultant. Someone anonymous, surgically precise. Dominic doubled down on digital security. I drafted a statement, one that would go live the moment the story broke. Then Daniel came home. He looked exhausted. I went, he said quietly. I figured. She's scared. She should be. She's also dying. I froze. What? She didn't want me to tell you. Breast cancer. Stage 4. No more chemo. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my mind a tangled net of anger, sympathy, suspicion. And now she wants me to withdraw all support from you. Legally, financially, publicly. I looked at him. And will you? No. Why not? Because I finally see her, and I finally see you. I reached for his hand. And because I know who I married, you don't run, you rise. Outside, the lake had begun to freeze. But the lines between war and peace had never been murkier. And morning was coming. Let them come. I was ready. The storm didn't arrive with thunder. It came quietly, one email at a time. The first was from an anonymous tip line, linking to a forum post that accused Harcourt Retreat of laundering money through a now-defunct hospitality firm in Monaco. The second was a DM to Claire's business account with a fabricated invoice, $48,000 for executive companionship services, falsely billed to the resort. By noon, 3 hashtags were trending. #EstGonorrhogue, #FamilyFortress, and worst of all, #VictoriaTheVillain. Claire texted me the moment she saw them. Claire, it's coordinated. Someone's pushing these threads with bots. Also, the invoice leak is gaining traction. We need a counter-narrative. Me, drop the interview teaser, full release in 24 HRS, publish the forensic report, leak the Elspeth forgery angle. Claire, copy, but we need fire, not just defense. Me, then let's burn. I met with Dominic in the main library, a room once used for brandy and quiet scandal. He had blueprints spread out on the oak table, diagrams of the server architecture, timeline overlays of the breach, and the forensic report from June. He tapped the corner of a printout. This is where Andrew re-entered the system. We tracked the signal. It was routed through a Bell Trust satellite office in Luxembourg. And the tax records. Claire stepped in, a stack of documents in her hand. We have 3 Shellcore linked to Felicity. One is laundering funds from mineral rights in Kenya. The other is funneling money through a Christian charity that hasn't paid a dime to its listed beneficiaries in over 2 years. I looked up at them. Is it enough? Claire shrugged. Enough to end a reputation? Easily. Enough to end her? Maybe not. She's too well protected. But we can make it hurt. What about Melinda Grant? I asked. She hasn't made a public move since Elspeth's affidavit fell apart. Dominic exchanged a glance with Claire. Claire hesitated. We think Melinda is pivoting. Explain. She's targeting Daniel. My breath caught. What? She's building a case that he was the bridge between Bell Trust and Harcourt Holdings, that he used insider information to facilitate the purchase. If she can make it stick, she can freeze your accounts. I stood so fast my chair tipped backward. He had nothing to do with the acquisition. I know, Claire said gently, but optics don't care about truth. They care about story. That night, I found Daniel in the conservatory. He was sitting on the bench by the piano, staring out at the snow-dusted hedges. The air between us was still, fragile. I heard, he said before I could speak. I'm going to stop it. He turned to me. They're building a file on me, Victoria. They're trying to paint me as a mole. They'll fail. And if they don't? I hesitated. Then we expose everything. We go public with the full truth. Emails, timelines, purchase records, everything. He shook his head. That will destroy them. Then let it. His eyes searched mine. You don't mean that. I do. His jaw clenched. She's still my mother. And you're still my husband. We stared at each other, the silence a chasm lined with old guilt and newer loyalty. He stood, walked to me, and took my hand. I'll stand with you, he whispered. The next morning, I recorded the follow-up statement. I stood at the front steps of the resort, the frozen lake behind me, the flags of the Harcourt brand snapping in the icy wind. Good morning. My name is Victoria Harcourt, and I have been under siege. I spoke of systems, of legacy, of the quiet abuse of hospitality and inheritance, of what happens when power is inherited, not earned, and how that power will do anything to protect itself. Then I named them. Not Daniel, not Elspeth, but Felicity, and the Bell Trust. We have evidence, falsified affidavits, laundered accounts, shell corporations built on charity fraud. If you attack me with lies, I will answer with facts. If you come for my name, I will remind you of yours. By noon, the world had split in two. Half the headlines applauded me. The other half called me ruthless. And I didn't care. 3 days later, Melinda Grant filed an injunction to freeze Daniel's accounts. Claire met me with a folder of documents. You won't like this. I flipped through the first few pages and stopped. Photos. Daniel at a family dinner, 2 years ago, standing beside Andrew, one hand on a folder. Email transcripts. Daniel had forwarded an early vendor list to his father. It wasn't criminal, it wasn't intentional, but it looked toward damning. I stared at the page as though it might catch fire. We didn't know, I said. Claire looked away. We should've. My throat tightened. He didn't mean to help them. No, but he did. That night, Daniel found me in the wine cellar. He must have known I'd seen it. I didn't know, he said. I believe you. They're using it against you. I know. He stepped forward. Then let me go. My head snapped up. What? Divorce me, publicly. It creates a wall. If we're not married, they can't say you used me as a proxy. No. He touched my arm. Victoria, you've come too far, if I'm the chink in the armor. You are the armor. Tears rimmed his eyes. Don't let me be your downfall. You won't be, I said, because I'm going to win, and when I do, I want you beside me, not in the ashes. He nodded. And then he kissed me. Not like a husband. Like an ally. The next morning, Dominic stormed into the office. They've escalated. Again. He threw a dossier on the table. Anonymous whistleblower. Claims the resort was used to funnel donations from foreign nationals into political campaigns. What? It's a lie. But it's specific. Too specific. Someone's feeding them intel that's just close enough to the truth to hurt. Where did the report come from? Parliament's Ethics Committee. If it goes public, you're looking at an official inquiry. My fingers curled into fists. Time to go nuclear. Claire stepped in, holding a USB. Everything's ready, Felicity's full portfolio, offshore accounts, charitable fraud. The real owner of that New Zealand vineyard they pretend is ancestral. It's registered to a shell firm used by oligarchs. Leak it, I said. She paused. Once we do this, there's no way back. I stared at the USB. Then I nodded. Then we moved forward. The files hit the press 36 hours later. Every major paper, every financial blog. The matriarch of the Bell family, cornerstone of generational wealth, implicated in a string of international scandals. Felicity denied it all. Of course she did. But the tide had shifted. The public that once saw me as an intruder now saw something else. A disruptor. Not the villain, but the revolution. And the story was only halfway through. Then what do you want? I want you to withdraw the case against Daniel. I want a public statement clearing our acquisition, and I want you out. No more claims. No more heirs, no more whispers. She studied me for a long, terrible silence. Then she said, no. The word landed like a gavel. You want to fight, Victoria? You have one. But understand this. Legacy is not held in assets. It's held in perception. You may have burned my name in headlines, but your rise only makes people hungrier for your fall. She leaned forward. And I will be there to watch it. I stood slowly. I hope you enjoy the view then, because the only thing falling is your curtain. I turned and left, heart hammering. On the drive back, the snow thickened into a whiteout, but even through the storm, my mind burned. She wasn't done. And neither was I. By the time we returned to Harcourt Retreat, another fire had started. This time, literal. Smoke curled from the east side of the property. The old gardener's shed engulfed in flames. Staff were already evacuating. Fire crews had been called. But it wasn't an accident. Dominic ran up, coughing. It was arson, petrol residue, accelerants, and this. He handed me Worse, Felicity just filed a motion to freeze the foundation account, says she suspects misappropriation. She's going after our scholarship fund? She wants to paint it as a personal enrichment scheme. It's in my name. Exactly, they'll say you're laundering credibility. I sank into the chair. What's our play? Claire joined us. We release the books, full transparency, every donor, every recipient, every cent. And if that's not enough? She hesitated. Then we audit them, asterisk. The forensic team returned with a portfolio 2 inches thick. The Bell Trust had funneled over £11.4 million through charitable umbrellas into private estate upgrades, luxury travel, and hush money for legal settlements going back 10 years. One name kept appearing. Gallomir. Claire laid it out. She's transferring everything, slowly, quietly. By the time this scandal burns out, she'll have shed the Bell skin and emerged, rebranded. Philanthropist, visionary, survivor. And we'll be left holding the ashes, Dominic added. Unless we strike first, I said. The plan was brutal. We'd expose the timeline of the Gallomir shell companies, map them against every Bell Trust expenditure in the last 5 years, trace the laundering pipeline from donor pledge to private jet, then leak the entire dossier anonymously to the international financial watchdog. Claire stared at the map of transactions. You know this means she'll never stop. She already hasn't. Daniel entered the room. He looked tired, hollow. I saw the leak, he said, the ledger you're building. I stood. I'm not asking your permission. He nodded. I'm not trying to stop you. He stepped forward. I want to help. Claire blinked. After Gallomir? He held up a USB. Andrew gave me access. Not much, but enough to verify the holding transitions. I narrowed my eyes. Why now? Because I'm done trying to fix them. I want to fix this, asterisk. I took the USB. It was real. And just like that, I had a weapon she didn't know I possessed. The leak dropped on a Tuesday. 2 journalists. 3 watchdogs. 1 discreet member of parliament. Within hours, the headlines hit. Tricense asterisk, Bell Trust under scrutiny for financial misuse. Asterisk, asterisk. Luxury at the expense of legacy, how Gallomir was built on ghost funds. Asterisk. From philanthropy to fraud, the fall of a dynasty. Asterisk. By dusk, Felicity issued a statement. It was her first public address in 6 weeks. Recent allegations have targeted my family, my legacy, and my integrity. I assure you, these accusations are not only unfounded but maliciously designed by individuals seeking to dismantle a generational enterprise out of personal vendetta. She paused. I have weathered many storms. I will weather this. But she was rattled. For the first time, she looked small. In the days that followed, the tide turned. Daniel and I appeared together, strategically, interviews, appearances, quiet, firm unity. We invited former Bell Trust beneficiaries to speak out. We tripled transparency in our foundation. We donated the lawsuit funds to victims of fraud. And we let the headlines shift. Nimes asterisk, the Harcourts rebuild with integrity. Asterisk, legacy and leadership, a new chapter for modern dynasties. But it wasn't over. One night, long after midnight, a courier arrived. A small black envelope. No return address. Inside, a USB. And a note. Last chance to walk away. The signature? Felicity. I stared at it. Then slid the USB into the laptop. A single folder appeared. Victoria, 2011. I clicked it. Inside, emails, photos, old contracts. My first startup, the one I'd shut down years ago after a hostile investor threatened to sue. Some of the documents weren't just real, they were confidential. Things I'd long believed deleted. Claire, reading over my shoulder, whispered, "She went into your past. She went Bosh Tar deep, asterisk." Dominic narrowed his eyes. Some of these files could only be accessed from your private archive, which meant we had a new breach. Not at the retreat, not through Daniel, but somewhere worse. She's got someone inside, asterisk. I closed the laptop slowly and said, then so do we. It was just after 2 a.m. when the reality sank in. Someone inside my inner circle had been feeding Felicity information from my past. Not data scraped off old servers, not files left behind in forgotten inboxes, but live access. Ongoing. Confidential. Everything on that USB was buried behind layers of encryption in a vault Claire and I managed together. And yet Felicity had photos of my first investor contract, early IP registrations, the list of initial subscribers for a mailing list I'd shut down before the second round of funding. That kind of access didn't come from brute force. It came from trust. Claire stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. Dominic leaned in, studying the metadata. It was pulled 4 days ago, he said. Server ping shows a London IP. We had 5 team members working remote that day. Can we trace it? I asked. He hesitated. Eventually, but if they used a VPN or rerouted it through a dummy server? Claire cut in, we'll trace it. But even as she said it, her shoulders stiffened. Not from fear, from betrayal. Because she knew, as I did, that once we found the mole, someone we trusted would be gone. Not from fear. We started the audit that morning. 5 names, 3 contractors, 2 long-term staff. One of them was about to become the next strike point in this war. I sent Dominic to run the technical trail, login logs, timestamps, anomaly patterns. Claire ran behavioral checks, communications, tone shifts, gaps in deliverables. I stayed quiet, detached. But beneath that calm, something colder stirred. I was no longer the woman who smiled through Thanksgiving humiliation. I was no longer a guest. I was the architect of this empire. And architects protect what they build. The breach narrowed to one contractor, Erica Brandt, tech consultant, based in London, had worked with us since the early Harcourt retreat upgrade. Freelanced for 6 years. Highly rated, always on time. But last week, she'd pushed an update to our legacy archive systems, one that bypassed secondary authentication. She was scheduled to dial into a security recap at 10 a.m. I asked for the meeting to be moved up. Put her through now, I said. The call connected. Erica's face appeared. Mid-30s, sharp cheekbones, no makeup, wireframe glasses. She looked up from her screen and smiled. Morning, Ms. Harcourt. Didn't expect you on this call. No? She blinked. I mean, Claire usually handles vendor check-ins. Claire's here too. Claire sat forward. Hello, Erica. Erica's smile faltered. I wanted to personally thank you, I said. For the archive patch, it was creative. She froze. Can you walk us through why you bypassed the dual auth system? She hesitated. I didn't. I mean, I thought it was a redundant layer. It slowed file access. We were under a data migration deadline. That wasn't your call to make. Her face twitched. Where did the patch route the data? I asked. She didn't answer. Claire tapped a file open. Erica, we tracked the mirror server. It routed to a network registered under MH Compliance Group, a group connected to Felicity Bell's tax attorney. Erica opened her mouth, closed it. Did she pay you? Silence. I leaned in. Or was it Andrew? Still nothing. Claire muted her end. She's deciding whether to run or confess. I unmuted. Erica, you have 30 seconds to talk before this call ends, and our legal team files a cybercrimes report. Erica swallowed. It was a contract. One-time deal. I didn't access anything private. I just installed the patch. They said it was for backup purposes. Claire barked a laugh. You believed that? No, but the money. I cut in. How much? 25,000. British pounds? She nodded. I leaned back. We pay you $150K annually, and you sold Access for a sixth of that? Her lips parted. But shame said enough. You'll return the money, Claire said, and sign a full confession. Then you'll resign, quietly, or you'll spend the next 5 years explaining your credentials to a judge. Okay, I'll cooperate. Good, I said. Then I ended the call. Land. We filed the internal breach report. Claire handled the contractor sweep. Dominic reinforced the vault. And I gave the press nothing. No fire. No fuel. We moved in silence. Felicity thought she'd scored a hit. But we'd turned it. And it was our turn to strike. The dossier from Daniel's USB kept giving. One folder buried deep in a finance subdirectory contained a ledger titled Scepter. Dominic decrypted it. Claire cross-checked the accounts. Scepter was a shadow holding, a real estate firm run through Gallimere, used for discreet acquisitions of failing British heritage properties, castles, manors, historic inns. On paper, it looked like investment. But the purchases were tied to politicians. 3 of them. All Conservative MPs. And in each case, the property value was inflated by 400% after receiving renovation grants from a cultural preservation nonprofit. That nonprofit? Also Bell-backed. Claire sat down hard. They're laundering influence through history. They're bribing Parliament with castles, Dominic added. We stared at the screen. It was risky, even for her. But it was traceable. We had names, wire transfers, emails. I made my decision. Claire, prepare the files. We go public in 72 hours. Daniel met me in the kitchen late that night. He poured tea, set the cup beside me. You're not sleeping, he said. No time. He paused. You found the mole. I nodded. And you're moving again. Of course. He studied me. You're not the woman who walked into our engagement party 5 years ago. No, I said. She died at that Thanksgiving table. He didn't smile, didn't flinch. Do you still love me? I looked at him. I do, but I also see you more clearly now, and I need to know you see me too. He leaned across the table. I see a woman who builds nations out of ashes, and I will not stand in her way again. By lean, the Scepter files dropped on Monday. Exclusive exposé, verified by 2 international watchdogs. By Tuesday, 3 MPs issued statements. 1 resigned, another opened an investigation. The Bell name, once whispered in reverence, now sounded like a scandal. On Wednesday, I received a letter. Handwritten, sealed in wax. Felicity's crest. Inside. Victory is only sweet when it's shared. You were always meant to inherit. I only regret not seeing it sooner. No signature. Just that one sentence. Claire read it. She's conceding. She's retreating, I corrected. Dominic smirked. Same thing, isn't it? I looked out the window. Snow was melting now, the lake beginning to thaw. And somewhere across the valley, Felicity Bell was packing her legacy into suitcases. But the war hadn't ended. It had only entered a ceasefire. Because victory wasn't about revenge. It was about what came next. The real work. The rebuilding. And I was just getting started. 2 days after the Scepter exposé detonated across every major news outlet, the Prime Minister's office issued a formal inquiry into the misuse of heritage funds. 3 MPs resigned before noon. Felicity's name, once wrapped in luxury and whispered lineage, now echoed with suspicion. But if I thought that would be the end, I'd underestimated her once again. Because ghosts don't go quietly. And Felicity Bell had always known how to haunt a room. The call came just after sunrise. Claire's voice was low, urgent. She's filed for mediation. I blinked, half-dressed in workout clothes, a protein bar in one hand. Mediation? Not litigation. Not arbitration. She's offering a closed-door settlement. She wants a meeting. Where? Neutral ground, Old Hall in Devonshire. I didn't answer. Claire waited. She's playing a different game now, not bombs, not scandals, strategy. She wants a private end, I said. Claire's tone darkened. Or a private offer. Dominic entered the room, phone still pressed to his ear. We got the formal notice. She's invoked Legacy Clause 12B. I frowned. That's not possible. That clause was voided when the retreat changed ownership. He nodded grimly. Unless she's claiming the clause predated the transfer, that the original Bell documents were forged. A silence fell over the room. Claire said it first. She's attacking the very beginning, asterisk. And I realized the truth. Felicity wasn't retreating. She was rewriting the opening chapter. Old Hall was a relic of England's damp, overgrown history. Ivy strangled the stone walls, and the gravel path looked like it hadn't seen a motor car since Thatcher left office. But the inside? Spotless. Polished wood, oil paintings, and the faint scent of roses and dust. Felicity waited in the parlor, wearing a heather gray suit and silk gloves. You came, she said. You summoned, I replied. We sat. Her attorney, a skeletal man named Orlan, poured tea like it was a funeral rite. Claire sat beside me. Dominic stood behind. Felicity didn't waste time. You've made quite the mess, she said. No, I said. I just stopped sweeping it under the rug. She gave a brittle smile. I'm not here to fight you, Victoria, not anymore. Claire muttered, You could have fooled us. Felicity folded her gloved hands. I'm here because I'm dying, and because the Bell name cannot survive another war. It has no sons left, no future, no shield. Dominic scoffed. Funny how that only matters now. She ignored him. I want to offer you something, an inheritance. I leaned forward slowly. Say that again. You want bloodline, I want legacy. We can give each other both. I name you sole inheritor of the Bell holdings. You take the seat at the International Trust. You own the retreat, Gallowmere, the vineyards, the Swiss house. I narrowed my eyes. And in return? You end the war, no more leaks, no more press. You remove yourself from the ethics committee. You sign a statement acknowledging no wrongdoing was proven. Claire exploded. So you get to walk away clean while Victoria scrubs the floor? Felicity didn't flinch. I'm offering the kingdom, just not the confession. I spoke slowly. Why me? Her voice dropped. Because you're the only one who earned it. Because I can't bury you. And because legacy must belong to someone who knows how to wield it. I stared at her. And for a moment, just one flicker in time, I saw the young version of her. Sharp, ambitious, unforgiving. I saw myself in her. And I hated that. That night, I stood at the frozen lake, watching the water pulse beneath the shell of ice. Claire joined me. She meant it, she said. She'll transfer it all. I know. So what now? I take it. She spun to face me. What? I take it all, but not on her terms. She wants a whitewash, Victoria. You can't let her write the ending. I won't, but I will take the pen. The next week unfolded like a stage play. Felicity's attorneys drafted the transfer agreements, Gallowmere, Bell Trust, international seats. All prepared. Claire and I inserted new clauses. Public transparency of all holdings. Mandatory donation of 20% of all profits to anti-corruption charities. Establishment of an education fund for girls disinherited due to family trusts. And one more. A recorded admission of non-interference in all legal proceedings to date. When the documents were signed, she blinked. You've changed the game, she said. I said nothing. She leaned in. And what will you do with it now, my dear? I looked at her. Build something no one can uninvite me from. 2 days later, Daniel and I sat in the garden. Spring was beginning to whisper beneath the snow. He held a letter in his lap. From Felicity. I never said goodbye, he said. She never knew how. He looked at me. Does this end it? No, I said. It just ends her part in it. And us? I reached for his hand. Still writing. At the first board meeting of the new Harcourt Bell Foundation, I stood before a crowd of journalists and investors. You once called me a guest, I said. But I am the architect now. And this? This is only the beginning. The applause rose. But beneath it, I heard something deeper. Not approval, but arrival. And this time, I wasn't just invited. I owned the room. Ayu Atop. We officially launched the Harcourt Bell Foundation 1 month later, with all the pomp and press required of a dynastic rebrand. But behind the handshakes and headline banners, something raw remained inside me, a flicker that refused to die down, even when every measurable win had been stacked in our favor. Because victory, I had learned, was rarely clean. It came with cost, with silence in late hours, with broken relationships left unhealed beneath the scaffolding of success. And it didn't erase what had been lost. Not my identity, not trust, not time. The Harcourt Bell Foundation's first week drew attention globally. Tech moguls, philanthropic leaders, economic analysts, they all weighed in. Some praised us, others called it performative repentance. A few, predictably, labeled me the villain with a crown. Claire handed me a stack of morning headlines. Queen of Reinvention, the heiress who took the castle by force, and my personal favorite, from guest to general. I raised an eyebrow. Did we print that one ourselves? Tempting, she smirked. But no, though it's already trending. Dominic entered, his tone more serious. We got a letter. I paused. From? He passed it to me. The envelope bore no crest, no postmark. But inside, a single line typed in courier font. Times, asterisk. You forgot who helped you get there. Asterisk. Below it, an image. Me. Outside the Devonshire meeting, but zoomed in. On the window behind me. Inside, barely visible, Daniel, arguing, with Felicity. Claire leaned in, her voice cautious. You think it's blackmail? No, I said. It's a warning. She frowned. From whom? Dominic answered before I could. Someone who thinks Daniel played both sides. I confronted him that evening. Quietly. Not as a CEO, not as a wife. Just as the woman who had once believed his silence meant loyalty. He met my gaze without flinching. She threatened to cut me out of everything, he said. The trust, the estate, the remainder of my father's pension. But more than that, she said she'd turn you into an international scandal if I didn't cooperate. I stared at him. Did you? No, I played along. Just long enough to gather intel. I was going to tell you, but you didn't. No. Silence stretched. Then I asked the only question I hadn't dared until now. Did you ever believe her? He looked away. That pause, just a second too long, was its own answer. I didn't want to, he said. That night, I slept in my study. Not out of spite, but because I needed space from the one person whose loyalty I had once believed was absolute. Claire found me at sunrise, still at my desk. She's not the threat anymore, she said gently. You know that, right? She taught me what to become, I murmured, and what not to forgive. She's gone, Victoria. You ended that era. I don't think it ends until I decide it's over. Claire placed a file in front of me. Then decide what to do about asterisk this. Asterisk. Inside, reports on Media Whispers, a podcast, 3 former Bell staffers talking to a new channel. All off the record, but painting the same narrative. That the Harcourt takeover wasn't clean. That Daniel was the hinge. That I'd manipulated my way into a dynasty. Claire crossed her arms. We can let it die or we go full response. Lawsuits, interviews, counter-narratives. I closed the file. No, I said. No what? No more defense, no more spin, let them talk. Claire frowned. That's not like you. It is now. Instead of war, I built. Instead of statements, I funded clinics in rural Spain, schools in underprivileged districts in Manchester. I commissioned a documentary series on women rewriting family empires. The noise didn't stop. But the world? The world began to shift. Power, I realized, wasn't just held. It was shaped, redirected, and slowly the story began to follow me, not Felicity. One morning, 6 months after the final transfer of Bell assets, I received an unexpected call. From her lawyer. "Miss Harcourt?" he asked. "Yes. She's passed, last night, peacefully. I was asked to contact you first." I didn't speak. "I have a personal letter. Would you prefer it by courier or email?" "Neither," I said. "I'm sorry?" "Burn it." I hung up. Claire was watching from the hallway. "She's gone?" "Yes." "And you don't want to read it?" I looked out the window. "No, because I already know what it says." At the private memorial, Daniel stood with a small group of cousins and shareholders. I arrived late. No cameras, no entourage. Just one purpose. Closure. The coffin was pine, simple, no inscriptions. I laid a single white hydrangea. Daniel stood beside me. "She wrote me too," he said. I figured. I didn't read mine either. We watched the wind ripple through the grass. "I don't think she ever really saw us," I said. Daniel nodded. "But maybe she saw what we could become, even if she hated it." That night, I returned to the lake. The ice was long gone. Water lapped against the dock. And I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not because I'd won, but because I no longer needed to. Legacy wasn't a throne. It was a door. And I had chosen to walk through it. On my own terms. The month after Felicity's funeral brought a strange, disorienting calm. No more whispers. No more lawsuits. No more envelopes sealed in wax or lawyers speaking like executioners in designer suits. It was like the world had finally taken a breath and exhaled her. But peace doesn't always bring clarity. In fact, sometimes it leaves a vacuum, and in that vacuum, the questions you were too busy to ask come screaming in. Who am I when the war is over? What does victory mean if it cost you parts of yourself? And what do you build when the empire you've taken isn't one you ever truly wanted? I started disappearing. Not physically. My face still showed up at foundation ribbon cuttings, on magazine covers, and occasionally in the corner square of global economic panels. But inside, something was unspooling. At night, I lay awake, not haunted by Felicity, but by Tsaipi 180. By the version of myself that rose in response to her fire, the woman forged in spite, in retaliation, in control. I missed the parts of myself that hadn't been shaped by defense. But I didn't know how to return to her, if she even existed anymore. Claire noticed first. "You haven't touched the expansion deck," she said one morning, standing over my untouched plate of breakfast fruit. "I've been reviewing internally." "No, you haven't," she said. "You've been floating." I looked at her. "You fought like hell to win all this. And now that it's yours, you're bored, or worse, ashamed." I flinched. She lowered her voice. "Victoria, you're allowed to rebuild you too, not just the brand." I swallowed. "And if I don't know what that looks like anymore?" Her reply was simple. "Then start with what it isn't, asterisk." I left the retreat that week. Just for 3 days. No press, no team. Just me, a rental car, and a small coastal town where no one cared who had bought what inheritance. I walked the cliffs, ate too many scones, wrote letters I didn't send, read poetry I didn't understand. And on the second night, I sat by a fireplace in a crooked inn, speaking to a woman named Edith, who had survived 3 husbands, lost 2 children, and still greeted the world like it owed her joy. "What did you do when they hurt you?" I asked her. She stared into the fire. "I survived them, then I outlived them, then I made soup." I blinked. "Soup?" She smiled. "Grief is loud, but comfort, that's a quiet craft, like soup, or home, or forgiveness." I cried that night. Not because I was sad, but because it was the first time I had allowed softness back in. When I returned to the retreat, Daniel was waiting at the gate. He didn't speak at first, just watched me climb out of the car, hair wind-tangled, eyes raw. "I thought you'd left," he said finally. "I did, briefly." He stepped closer. "I don't want an empire," he said. I looked up. "Then what do you want?" "You. The version of you that doesn't need to win every room just to feel safe." "I don't know if she's still here." "Then let's find her, together." Lakwell? We started small. A breakfast with no staff. A walk by the lake with no agenda. A night where we read aloud the most embarrassing things we wrote in university. We laughed. Really laughed. And when we made love again, it wasn't victory or strategy or release. It was return, Menier Snamps. The foundation expanded over the next quarter, slowly, intentionally. We didn't buy more land. We bought asterisk times Snamps, launched time banking initiatives in post-industrial towns, funded research into economic dignity. We created pause. And in that pause, I wrote a letter. To the girl I had been. The one who sat quiet at a Thanksgiving table and smiled through condescension. The one who kept her hands folded, her jaw clenched, her voice muted. And I told her, "You were not small. You were powerful in your restraint. You were watching, learning, waiting. You didn't need to become her. But I'm glad you did, because now we know both sides. And the next woman we become? She will be neither victim nor conqueror, but something else entirely. A maker, a mender, a mother maybe, a storm that has learned how to become the rain." Claire found the letter in my study. She left a note beside it. "Build her. I'll hold the line until you do." I bought an old bookshop in Cornwall. Named it Bell, Harcourt and Company. We gave it away 6 months later to 3 young women who dreamed of owning a place where stories lived without judgment. And every year on Thanksgiving, I visit anonymously. I buy a copy of whatever's featured on the staff pick shelf. Last year, it was a novel about quiet revolutions. This year? A memoir written by a woman who once bought a resort and closed it. Not to punish, but to begin again. In her own name. The 11th chapter of the story wasn't written with headlines, acquisitions, or legal filings. It was written in moments so small, most people wouldn't notice them. And that was the point. Because rebuilding wasn't loud. It was quiet. It looked like early mornings at the retreat, long before the staff arrived, when I would walk barefoot across the dew-kissed stone to the lake's edge and simply listen. It looked like handwritten notes left in the kitchens for every new employee. "You belong here. Say what you see. Your voice matters." It looked like deciding that silence no longer meant safety, and that power wasn't something you wielded like a sword, but something you carried like a lantern. Krantz. Harcourt Bell entered its second year not as a legacy brand, but as something stranger and harder to define. A holding company that also trained social workers. A foundation that doubled as an emergency response hub. A luxury property group with a publishing imprint that exclusively published women over 50. We weren't building castles anymore. We were building bridges. And that terrified the old world. The resistance came subtly. First in finance circles. Rumors that our board was over-diversified. That no companies should give chair seats to community representatives. Then in politics, commentators whispering that our foundation's rapid community investments were an attempt to buy sainthood. Daniel caught the first hint of coordinated pushback during a panel in Geneva. An offhand question from a supposed academic that quickly spiraled into accusations of philanthropy laundering. I didn't respond to it publicly. I didn't need to, because others did. Foundation beneficiaries, staffers, people we'd helped, women who had once been guests in their own families and who now owned businesses, wrote essays, taught courses, started shelters. They answered for me. And their answer was clear. We're not guests anymore. We're hosts. In early spring, I met a young woman named Rima. She'd been a scholarship recipient the previous year, funded by one of the education grants we set up with Bell Trust Reparations. She cornered me after a conference panel. "You don't remember me," she said. I studied her face. "No, but I'd like to." She smiled. "I saw you give a speech once, 2 years ago. You said legacy is what happens when no one has to ask permission anymore." I remember saying that. I was in foster care. I hadn't applied to university because I thought there was no point. But after that night, I wrote an application. I just got into my second year at Oxford. I felt the breath catch in my chest. Rima held out a notebook. "I'm writing my dissertation on narrative inheritance. May I send you a copy when it's done?" "Yes," I said, "please do." The retreat celebrated its centennial that summer, not with a gala, but with a free concert in the gardens. Local musicians, communal food, lanterns lit across the lake. Daniel and I danced barefoot in the grass. We laughed like we had when we were nobodies with wine-stained hands at a charity gala where he first saw me as more than a guest. "I like this version of us," he said. "I do too." Claire took a photo of us. Just one. It was never posted online. That was the point. Some victories don't belong in feeds. They belong in memory. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a summit on succession. I almost said no. I didn't want to be seen as the blueprint. I wasn't perfect. I had ruled with rage, defended with pride, taken joy in some downfalls I shouldn't have. But Daniel said something that changed my mind. "You didn't win because you were right," he said. "You won because you were honest. And because you refused to stay invisible." So I went. And I told the room. I was told I was a guest in someone else's story, that my presence was conditional, that my voice was only welcome if it echoed theirs. They forgot that guests are the ones who notice the cracks in the walls. They forgot that we remember the things that don't work, the silences that hurt, the glances that exclude. And one day, if we survive long enough, guests write their own invitations. Guests build their own houses. Guests buy the entire venue and close it for renovations. And if you're lucky, we'll invite you back. The standing ovation was not what moved me. What moved me was the woman in the back, gray hair in a braid, wiping tears from her cheek, nodding like she had just been seen for the first time in years. I stepped down from the podium and walked to her and said the only thing I knew mattered. "You belong here." She nodded. "So do you." Hulgiwako. The final part of this story doesn't end in a courtroom. It doesn't crescendo with another headline or collapse in betrayal. It doesn't even climax with some grand final confrontation. It ends exactly where it began. A table. But this one wasn't theirs. This one was mine. It was the second anniversary of the Harcourt Bell Foundation, and I'd insisted the celebration be small, not performative, not flashy, just intentional. We held it at the retreat, our oldest property, under the glass pavilion overlooking the lake. The same lake that once reflected my fear back at me now shimmered with something else. Peace. Not because the battles were over, but because I no longer needed to win them all to feel whole. Our guest list was short. Dozens, not hundreds, mostly women. Some young, some older, none of them invited because of their family trees. All of them chosen because of who they'd chosen to become. We didn't serve a curated menu. Everyone brought a dish. Even me. I brought the cranberry relish Daniel and I had once made the morning before that fateful Thanksgiving, the day I was told I was just a guest. I placed it gently between a tray of West African jollof rice and a towering bowl of Macedonian stuffed peppers. Someone asked, jokingly, who made the fancy pink jam? I smiled. "Oh, that's mine, family recipe." And for the first time in years, I wasn't lying. Because this was my family now. Claire gave the toast. Of course she did. 2 years ago, she said, we weren't sure what we were building. All we knew was that it couldn't look like what we'd inherited. And Victoria? She didn't just build an empire. She cracked open the windows, let the air in, and handed out the blueprints. Laughter, glasses raised. And when she finished, everyone turned to me. Waiting. Not for performance, but for truth. I stood slowly. And I told them the truth. I used to believe power lived in titles, in buildings, in who got to sit at the head of the table. But now I know it lives in who sets the table, who's invited, who's heard, and whether anyone is brave enough to leave the door open, even for the ones who once shut it in your face. Because this is not just a room. It's a reckoning. And from now on, the only hierarchy we honor here is kindness. The room fell into a long, aching silence. Then applause. Then music. Then dancing. And for the first time since all of it began, I stopped watching the exits. I stopped expecting the next strike. I was no longer a guest. I was no longer an intruder. I was home. The following morning, Daniel and I sat on the deck sipping tea. The sunrise painted streaks of gold and blood orange across the lake. It reminded me of that first moment I had dared to imagine a world where I didn't have to ask permission. He reached across the table, threading his fingers through mine. You ever think about what would have happened if you just let it go? All the time, I said. And? I wouldn't have survived it, not emotionally, not spiritually. It would have eaten me alive to keep sitting at their table, smiling while they erased me with every toast. And now? I looked at him. Now I know I don't need their table. He nodded. I'm proud of you. I exhaled. I'm proud of me too. I still get letters. From women, mostly. Sometimes men. Strangers who heard the story, or read the articles, or watched the documentary one of our interns surprised me by producing as a capstone project. They all say the same thing, in their own way. I thought I was crazy, but now I know I was just early. I thought I was small, but now I see I was surrounded by people who were scared of my size. I thought I was a guest, but now I know I was the host all along. I write back. Every time. Even if it's just one line. You are not alone. Because that was what I needed all those years ago. Not a war. Not a speech. Just someone to tell me, you are not alone. And now that I'm here, really here, I'll never let another woman believe she has to earn her seat with silence. I kept the resort. Of course I did. But I never reopened it to the public. It became a sanctuary, a residency, a space for restoration, for reinvention, for reunion. We host monthly circles there, not leadership retreats, not luxury packages. Just chairs, candles, music, and stories. Stories like mine. Stories like theirs. Stories like yours. And we listen. Not to respond, but to remember. That once upon a time, someone said, "You're just a guest." And that woman? She bought the resort, and she closed it. Not to lock anyone out, but to make space for everyone who never got their invitation. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.